Alright guys, TacticalRab here today. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Rostermania is still chugging along and plenty of news to discuss on that front today. The key piece of which being that Crowder, the head coach of Atlanta FaZe, may indeed have confirmed his decision to step down for that role going into next year. Does this significantly increase the risk that the slasher move does not work out in their favour? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Closing in on 85,000. Let's keep on going. Doug says 61 days, I guess, after today until Modern Warfare 2 comes out. Not honestly that far away, but it is obviously quite a distance nonetheless. Let's dive straight into the Rostermania stuff then. Paulex's destination is far from clear right now. We'll see some potentials here in a second. The London guys got together yesterday in London. Afro actually was there, even though Afro, of course, is not going to be on that team. So the fact that some players were or were not in attendance doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be on the roster next season. But Zero was there in London. Now, Paulex says, I have some questions for you guys. So yes, Paulex, we heard the link that maybe Paul could go to London. Of course, he was there briefly as a sub this season to pretty good effect, but stepped out again for Gismo. Gismo might be going over to the Florida Mutineers. That's a possibility, but there are another, set of options there in that flex position, most certainly that they might be looking at. But yeah, Paulex currently restricted free agent from the New York Subliners. They don't want to build around him, it seems. I'm pretty sure that the kind of ship has sailed in a sense internally, and yeah, Paulex is going to be gone. They're going to replace him with another flexible on that team, rumoured to be Priest right now, but that could also change. This was just what the London guys are up to. We can see, Nastie, Afro's even here, despite the fact that he's obviously confirmed to be going now to the Minnesota Rocker. Zero's here as well. No Gismo in sight. Definitely maybe worthy of note. Now, I did talk about this last night in yesterday's video, but if you guys missed it, I'll just mention real quick, because there are even some further updates to what I exactly said. But, I mean, yeah, these are the changes if it wants to load for me over the Breaking Point site, where Crone came out with these beautiful list of rosters. And here we go. So, Toronto Ultra, we've got CleanX, Insight, Scrappy, Hicksy, or Standy. This is the key piece now where it seems like Standy might be going to Toronto. Honestly, I kind of like this because Hicksy, I think, can be a solid player. I kind of always thought that since he was on the bench, he was going to be the long-term replacement for Bance. But, the way it's worked out, do they still need a slaying kind of SMG that can deliver good numbers? They probably do, and I'm not sure they're convinced, and maybe I'm not convinced either that Hicksy can necessarily quite be that guy on the team. CleanX is going to be the aggro guy, he's going to have a 0.95 KD in an ideal world with crazy aggression. Scrappy is obviously going to be a key slayer, Insight's your search and destroy guy, but really for this team to be dominant, I think they need a slaying SMG, and Standy, I think, does have that upside in his arsenal, right? Now look, of course, it must be said, last season Standy was nowhere near the player he was in Cold War. Cold War, he was that type of player. Last year in Vanguard, he was nowhere near at all. This year, if he's like an average between the two, then that's probably okay for Ultra, but they're kind of investing here if they do get Standy in a player that can be what he was back in Cold War. Now, like, how similar does this game play to Cold War or to Vanguard? We really don't know. We'll have to wait and see. That's why it's, so difficult to build rosters in Call of Duty. This one, Boston, just kind of confirming what has been rumoured, that Beans will be the sub here for the Boston Breach. This is the current Subliners roster that he is still theorising with Priester here, but even I've heard that maybe that's not a guarantee at this point and they're looking at other options. And London has kind of stayed the same here, with Paulex probably joining, but it's the Florida team that's now changed up a bit. So yesterday we looked at it was going to be Major Maniac, Vickle, Havoc, and Brack. Now still Nastie and Gismo might be in consideration here, but it is interesting if this is the team on the left-hand side that they go for. Brack also an interesting player to note from a few years ago, but yes, my perception is that Standy may well be coming into this Toronto Ultra team. It is interesting from, more than one side, because of course he's been on the Minnesota Rocket the last couple of years. He was their key find, really, and their key piece of talent acquisition. They did a great job picking up Standy when they did in Cold War. Wasn't the same player at all though last year, and that's the thing really here for Toronto, is that okay, Bance and Cammy, of course, okay, you can say Bance was probably their worst player statistically on the team, but Cammy, I think, is maybe this player on that team with the highest ceiling potentially on that Toronto roster from last season. Both of those guys go to Minnesota and they buy them out of Toronto, and Afro, who was meant to be the slaying SMG target here for Toronto, also gets bought out by Minnesota. So they effectively just, get their wallet out and take everything from Toronto, and then Toronto gets Standy in return effectively from Minnesota. So there's been some trades going down there in the Battle of the North. Obviously on paper Minnesota win those trades because arguably Toronto get one of their weakest players in Standy, and Minnesota get Cammy the other way around. So it's interesting to keep your eyes on that, because it makes that battle all the more interesting effectively. But also Standy, if he can be the player he was before, and he's maybe got the fire under him a bit more now, he's got to prove Minnesota wrong for dropping him, then maybe it could be a different story again. Just this to say also on the Subliners side, now I don't exactly know what this means, if anything at all, but this tweet comes out here from Killer Ghost. I'm not gonna lie, if the Subliners side Priester, I'm becoming a Boston fan, he says. Now, if you click on the likes here and scroll down, you will find that, here we go, Priester has actually liked this tweet. So pretty interesting. Does this mean he is joining New York, or maybe he means he's not joining New York, and now, like, that's why he's liked this tweet? Who really knows? But there is obviously some link maybe between Subliners and Priester, given the fact that that was going on. I thought I would just mention it at the very least for you guys. This also, though, a big question to me is what exactly is going on the gunless side? Because yes, this guy's had a difficult couple of seasons with the illness and stuff he had this past year, but he's still gunless, man. I feel like people are maybe forgetting too quickly the Infinite Warfare Black Ops 4 years stretch that he had, where at one point he was the best player in the game, at least at one point. Even the start of Modern Warfare was pretty good. Last year in Cold War didn't do that much, but he was on the Seattle Surge. You could say the same for Octane, and this past season was a pretty solid player, but of course had the illness that took him out. He had to have the surgery, this type of stuff. So why people aren't going over gunless, I really don't understand. But yeah, right now he's not on any of these rumored rosters. Does he want to grind out challenges? Like, is he going to sit on the bench of FaZe? That is actually a possibility. I do wonder whether if he doesn't get a spot somewhere, gunless to the bench of FaZe might make sense. Like, he can run an SMG or an AR if required, so that might make sense given the fact that Prestinni, of course, is gone from their bench now. I just wanted to say that it was indeed Max Envisions who made this fantastic graphic we looked at yesterday, but a good segue really into the whole this Slasher dynamic really on Atlanta FaZe. Slasher even himself tweets this out that was pretty funny. He tweeted out that you could do it FaZe up meme with you know, with Slasher behind the counter as well as Cellium, and of course this was on what, St. Petrograd back in Modern Warfare, and we're going back into Modern Warfare 2 where hopefully there's going to be a remake of this fantastic map, and maybe Piccadilly as well to go along to boot as well. But yes, we know that FaZe, they've got Slasher in the team. The big concern, of course, there are some upsides. The downside is that Arcitys was the player that kept that team in check, arguably, in terms of their communication, in terms of getting the best out of those guys, and the leadership style he has seemingly worked really well with Simp, aBeZy, and Cellium. Will that be the same for their new IGL, their new kind of leader player, main AR in Slasher? That's a big question mark. Now, of course, I've talked about a fair bit, and maybe a little bit controversially, that I think this team can actually work out rather well. And even, you know, Slasher said, right here, TJ says, when Cellium snakes you versus when he snakes on your team, Slasher's seemingly already getting ready to go for, you know, defending Cellium snaking and stuff like that after being rather critical of it the last couple of years. But the big concern, of course, is, like, okay, maybe Slasher wasn't the first choice of Simp, aBeZy, and Cell. Maybe they wanted to go down another route. They obviously wanted to get rid of Arcitys, but maybe Slasher wasn't necessarily the number one guy that they were targeting here. And if that is the case, then there could be a world in which, if those guys don't mesh so well with Slasher's leadership style, then things blow up rather quickly. I made the point that I don't really think Slasher's going to be the one to come in here and blow up this team and ruin the chemistry, given the respect that he, I'm sure, has for these players and this opportunity, but it's more going to be the other way around. If Simp, aBeZy, and Cellium aren't really getting on with the way Slasher's, what he's bringing to the table, then I think, yeah, they could effectively force him out and try and get someone else, because they obviously are the key players that this team will be built around going forwards. And even, you know, Slasher has a few words to say here for Prestinni. But I thought the key piece of the puzzle might be the coach of this team, right? Because Crowder has great history, not just with the FaZe guys, but also with Slasher himself. And look, if he could potentially manage the relationship there between all of these guys, make sure everything's getting on okay, then I think, you know, there's less reason to worry if you're a FaZe fan that this team will indeed work out. However, for those preying on the downfall of FaZe, this could be good news for you, because we saw this a couple of weeks ago now, that Crowder removed FaZe from his name and bio after the World Championship, especially removing head coach of FaZe from his bio, indicating his intention to go into a content creator situation over at the FaZe organization. This effectively seems to have been confirmed last night. Ben did say at the time he's not going to go to another team, he's not going to go and coach Thieves, for example, but what he is going to do more than likely now is step away from competing. Clip came out last night where he mentions it. I mean, look, he says it very briefly, it's literally a one-word response, but look, he just straight up gets asked, is he going to be the head coach for FaZe, and he says no, pretty emphatically.
Who's better than me?
Yo, I'm letting my dog out, I'll be right back.
No, we need to have a team speak only for
Let your dog out, shut up!
Bro,
Replays, are you gonna be the head coach of FaZe? No, I'll be back.
I'm saying recently when we've been playing, I'm the one.
So what does this mean for this FaZe team, right? Because Crowder, of course, was the coach of the 100 Thieves team with Slasher that had so much success a few years ago. Now, in fairness, during that season, Crowder was not the coach for the FaZe guys, right, at the time, right? I mean, they were on E United as it was, like at Simp and aBeZy, of course. Cellium, of course, was on FaZe, where Crowder was on 100 Thieves. So all of Simp and aBeZy, certainly on E United, had success not with Crowder, but with, of course, with Vicento, who was was their coach at the time as well, before he went on to do his kind of agency thing that he's got going on at the moment for Center. So pretty cool stuff. But again, what it means is you can even see Simp in the bottom right-hand side. So yes, look, these guys have had success with Crowder and without Crowder. But the last couple of years since the inception of the CDL, Crowder has been a key piece really to their, back-end staff in making sure everything ticks over and is okay chemistry-wise, and obviously really understands very well Simp, aBeZy, Cellium, what they need, how things work best within that camp when those guys are okay. Now, of course, look, if Sasha was to come through and Crowder as the coach can help manage that relationship, given his already good relationship with Sasha from a couple of years ago, that could be a perfect situation where the communication and the other potential risks can get managed by a good head coach that really understands all those players and what makes them tick and what makes them successful, having seen the ups and downs of the last few years. If Crowder all of a sudden is not there anymore, does that significantly increase the risk that things go seriously wrong? Now, RJ is the other coach for the FaZe team. He's been with these guys for many years, and he could step up to that head coach position. The alternative, of course, is they bring in another coach. Now, what I imagine might happen here is because Crowder, yes, he probably wants to do content, right? I think that's relatively clear. For a few years now, he's not wanted to, turn up to scrims every day and all the grind that entails with that, right? And he probably thinks he doesn't get paid enough for all the stresses of being a coach. You get none of the credit usually and all of the blame often for some of the coaches when things go wrong. Probably thinks, look, the content route, what TP did, that's more what he wants to do. He's done a few years here as being a coach. He's had his success. He's won his world championships as a player and as a coach, and he wants to move on to other things. Now, look, whether FaZe would still keep him around in some sort of consultancy role with the team, that's kind of what I would expect. Even if he's no longer the head coach of the team, and that's the thing, he said he's no longer the head coach. Does that not mean he's any coach at all? Because another coach could become the head coach, and then Crowder could come into scrims, once, twice a week, just to check how things are going on. I kind of doubt that Crowder will just completely step away from the team and will never talk to the players or anything like that. I still think Crowder can be there in some sort of facilitating role, but just won't be there day in, day out in practice, barking in their ears all the time, which maybe the team is kind of fed up of over the, difficult last season in Vanguard as well. So definitely an interesting one though, right? Because I think that is the key concern. We know that the firepower with Slasher should be absolutely emphatic, and it's really a question of whether Slasher's leadership style will mesh with these guys, whether the communication is going to work, whether the chemistry is okay, whether egos will get the best of these players. And Crowder has kind of proved that he can be an excellent man to manage those situations. If he's no longer there, then does that put this FaZe team in a potential big hole? That's a question. Now look, can RJ do that role? Can another coach do that role? Or whether Crowder stays on in some capacity, that is still possible, but it is practically confirmed at this point from everything that's gone on with the tweet and the bio changes and everything that Crowder's not going to be doing that full-time role. Maybe FaZe come through and give him an absolute mega bag and say, look, stay around for one more year to facilitate this transition into the Slasher era, and then maybe he's like, yeah, fair enough, and he'd probably prefer to do it on a basis where he can still be a full-time content creator and then occasionally dip into the team and see how things are getting on a consultancy basis. Who really knows? The other possibility is, of course, bringing in some other coach to the team. We've talked about Parasite, we've talked about even Sender, but there are guys like Phoenix from Seattle Surge, Marky B even from Toronto, that are apparently free agent coaches that are either not continuing their contract, have been let go, or are just exploring options as it stands. That's the case with Sender. Arcitys, though, has indicated that maybe Sender to Los Angeles Guerrillas, given the fact that LAG currently don't have a coach, and that Sender and Arcitys kind of go way back to the Huntsman days, that is a possible relationship if Sender wants to be a head coach for a team rather than just be the assistant guy on Optic. That's one to keep your eyes on. So yes, I kind of doubt Sender goes to FaZe, but they might need some sort of replacement to Crowder, and that's not going to be easy to find at all. And even, of course, Parasite has indicated that maybe there's an opportunity on the horizon for him as well. But definitely tweet your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, hit the like button, tell us YouTube gods it's a good video, and I was like you should see it as well, and upgrade the competitive Call of Duty community. Thank you as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.
aBeZy's mom, she's really, really cool. You know? She's also, I see the, how do I say this? The height thing. Yeah. Makes sense now. Okay? Makes sense. It's not, sorry, aBeZy, for all the 2% jokes. You literally, you were nerfed from the beginning, dude. You didn't have a chance, man. You didn't. Okay?